Tom Smith wrote a couple of books, Facing PTSD and Easy Target, and I have to tell you, I read this in one sitting. I was completely captivated. I said, well, I'm going to read it over the next week or so, and I couldn't put it down. It's a wonderful book. Tom is a Vietnam veteran who has really met a lot of challenges with PTSD that he will definitely talk to us about, and boy, has he overcome a lot of them. And with good friends, such as his beautiful wife. Where is,
yeah, there she is.
Come on, there she is. There's Kathy. And one of his other best friends,
my dog.
Zach. He will tell you about Zach, which is heartwarming. So thank you so much, Tom, for coming down here from New York. I just want to share one quote. When I had sent Tom an email when we were organizing this, I had thanked him for coming to do this to help our veterans and any folks who have PTSD. And his response to me was, as far as he was concerned, to helping veterans with PTSD, he said, as far as I'm concerned, I have no choice. So he's a man. Oh, and as far as this book goes, Tom has generously offered to give it to veterans free of charge.
Or their family, yeah, anyone.
Yeah, or anyone. And if you, but if you feel inclined to give a donation to help defray costs, that would be appreciated as well. But I can't recommend this book highly enough.
Thanks,
Tom Smith.
Thank you.
Oh, and excuse me, there's food. There's coffee,
well,
water.
Let's get right to that.
Please, it's casual. Get up and down and eat and get food as you wish.
Well, I'd like to thank a few of my own, Carol and Arthur Westing, for thinking of this thing and approaching Sharon, and Sharon, of course, for setting this up. Really do appreciate it. And the VA for the facility and letting us use it, and all of you for coming. Really, this is amazing. I was going to be happy if Kathy showed up. I really appreciate all you showed up. And the diversity here, I think, is wonderful also. When I was in high school, I think I was a junior or a senior, I heard about Vietnam. Didn't have much interest in it. It was on the other side of the world, and I was focused a little more locally at the time. So when I went to college, of course, there was quite a few demonstrations against the war at that time. And I really didn't want to protest and stuff like that. My dad was in World War II. He was in the Army and got a number of medals, and I had a lot of respect for what he did. So I didn't feel like participating in that. But it seemed that all the pretty girls were involved in the protests, so I tended to go that way. I wasn't behind the war in any respect. But unfortunately, I came from the East Coast to college in Colorado, and I like to ski. And it was only a matter of weeks before I was suspended from college. I went up to Vail. We had just opened Vail, and it was terrible. And so I got the old greetings from Uncle Sam and that kind of thing. At that point, I really didn't know what to make of the war. The domino effect was how they were advertising it. That didn't really sound very threatening. Dominoes just don't conjure up images of, death and destruction. They got a little smarter in these more recent wars. They got, WMDs and mushroom cloud smoking guns and stuff like that. Now that kind of stuff could have gotten you worried. But I didn't really, see much point in going over there. I got suspended and got drafted, so I was going to end up as an infantryman in Vietnam. But I had a brother. My oldest brother was Norm. But at this time, my parents had been killed in a plane crash about 3 or 4 years later. So my oldest brother was running our family, and he was in the Navy, and he had a brother-in-law in Vietnam. And he said, Tom, if you're going to be drafted, you're only as important as the weapon you carry. I mean, if they give you a $6 gun, that's all you're worth. If they give you $1 million helicopter, you're going to be pretty important to them. And that made sense to me. And, the whole thing he said about flying used to be a lot of fun. He said, Harry's having a great time. He's over in Saigon. He's living in a nurse's barracks, I think, or something. So, it sounded pretty good. So I went into the Army, and I ended up in Fort Polk in Louisiana in the middle of the summer. And I wasn't happy. It was hot. It was miserable. They shaved off our hair. The worst thing was, here's the hottest place in the world, and they have no beer. Seriously, can you imagine that? It's like masochistic. So anyways, I'm glad it only lasted 2 months. But after Fort Polk came Hunter Stewart, which was flight school. I joined as a warrant officer candidate, following my brother's advice, getting into flight school. And Hunter Stewart was great. It was in Savannah, Georgia. You could get to the beach, pretty trees, lots of bars, beer, nice town. But then I started flying helicopters, and I fell in love instantly. I mean, just the smell of jet fuel and hot asphalt in the morning, getting out at 4 or 5 to go out to pre-flight your helicopter. They're neat machines. I mean, they have so many moving parts. They're just fascinating. And then the first time you take off, you just climb up over the tree line, slowly, and the whole world just opens up in front of you. And then you cruise along and you see what's going on in that swimming pool, and you just fly all around. But then came the training part. Incidentally, the Army flight school was without doubt the best, probably in the world. It was excellent. They taught us everything. And really, because helicopters were new to the Army at that time. They had them in Korea, but those were just, the old Bell 47s, and they didn't do a lot with them. So anyways, they had all these neat new turbine helicopters, and they were training us as best they could. And then after we, achieved a certain amount of competence, they let us go out on our own. And that's where a good friend comes in. My good friend was Craig Fielding. We met walking penalty laps, I think the second day in flight school. We would go out on all free time and it was amazing what we'd do as helicopters. Would fly under bridges, do head-ons of trains at night with your light on, things like that, flying down the tracks. Aerial bombardment, they'd give us box lunches on long day trips, and those were great for, nailing church steeples and things like that. I mean, we really had a lot of fun. I mean, I enjoyed flying so much that by the time I was getting towards the end of flight school, I wasn't going to war. I was going to fly helicopters in someplace else, It was really, I got that involved in the flying. But then I ended up in the 1st Cav, the 1st Cavalry Division in Tainan. And they were a pretty serious group of soldiers, not quite like the Marines. Nothing quite like the Marines. But they like to think they were. And they like to get fight. And the unit I was assigned to with 1st Cav was the headquarters company. And we had 2 missions, command and control, which was flying the senior officers around at about 5,000 feet so they could direct the battle below. And we had scouts who went out and, just like scouts forever, went out looking for the enemy, flying low level in the trees. So I started out in command and control, but that didn't last long. It was pretty tough sitting up there at 5,000 feet doing circles, watching what was going on below in the jungle. Especially, a lot of errors are made from the back seat of a helicopter, as I'm probably sure most people in the military know. And so I didn't do that for very long. I got into scouts. And if helicopters are fun, scouts is the epitome of flying helicopters. It was like having a motorcycle in the tree. We had these little Hughes 500. Howard Hughes actually designed it himself. He designed it like an egg, and so it would crash well, because he knew how we were going to fly these things. I mean, you could literally do anything. And we flew around in the tops of the trees. It behooved us to stay in the tops of the trees, because we'd go out looking for them in the jungle, and we'd have an idea where they were. And just myself and one door gunner would sit, both of us on the right-hand side, and would do right-hand turns. Would follow their trails through the jungle. And as we got closer and closer, we could tell we were getting closer, the signs were fresher. But you'd have to go slower and slower until you're eventually blowing the trees apart so you can see the trail, And that's where they are usually, is right when you blow the tree apart. And they all stand up and they start shooting at you. That was a drawback. It was a great, interesting thing. But they really shot at us a lot. As a matter of fact, I got shot down. The first time I got shot down was on fire. And was that the first time? Yeah, I think so. The first time I shot down on fire, and that was really scary in a helicopter, because helicopters don't like to land when they're on fire. If you come to a hover, they blow up. Making it even worse, I was shot down over trees, and if you hit trees on a burning helicopter, they explode too. But fortunately, and just as I was running out of rotor RPM and all options, I saw a little thing of water, and I got over these trees and did a running landing in the water, and then almost drowned. So it was, it did have some tough times. The last time I got shot down through a couple hundred feet of trees and broke my back in 3 places. and my jaw in several too. That was the worst one. That got me sent home. Excuse me, but up until that day, it was really probably the most exciting, rewarding part of my life. Exciting and obviously in the flying, and rewarding because I was working with the grunts. We were out there with their point men, you know, and we could go all around, tell them what they're going to run into, you know, do all kinds of assessments for them, medevac their wounded, and then help them get out, you know, find a way out and stuff like that. And we really did that on a daily basis. Well, we sort of had to because we got them there. I mean, that was our job, was go out and find the places for them to go. And then when they got there, we made it our responsibility to make sure they could get out as best we could. So it's a very rewarding job. Then I got out of the Army. They wouldn't let me stay in because of my broken jaw, my broken back. So I got out right after Vietnam. And I went back to college and did what every soldier does, or most soldiers do when they get out of the Army. I bought a Porsche. And, let's see, 1 year later it had 70,000 miles and I totaled it. I mean, I was averaging something like 200 and some miles a day. I just loved driving that car. And I drank a lot. Let's see, bought a fast car, drank excessively, totaled car, 70,000 1 year, got married and divorced in 1 year. Then I went to Borneo. It was one of those things, you know, where I was definitely moving around a lot. I went to Borneo. That was great. That was really interesting. I was landing in villages where they'd never seen a white man, much less a white man in a white helicopter with a sling of dynamite. They would really freak out. It was pretty fun. But so I worked in Borneo for a year, and then came back to the States and worked in. That's when I got married in California for a year, and then got divorced, and then I had to go up to Alaska to pay for the divorce. They were paying about twice as much up there. So I went up to Alaska, and sort of the same thing happened up there that happened in Vietnam. I just fell in love with the place. And then once again, the flying was amazing. And there were no rules, you know, because the helicopters hadn't been there before. So we literally could do whatever we wanted. The FAA didn't even know we were there. We stayed under 500 feet, and that was fine with them. So, and once again, the machines were magnificent for the things we'd do in Alaska, from rescuing people off peaks that they just could never get off, just fire suppression, to mineral exploration. One of the places I worked was up in the Brooks Range, one of the most beautiful places in the world. And they've been in there with bulldozers looking for, it's a massive sulfide, one of the largest massive sulfide bands in the world. It stretches for about 2,000 miles. And to look for those, they'd come in with bulldozers and drills and stuff like that. But we could come in with a helicopter, put down a drill, you know, come out with the core samples, be gone the next day, you'd never even know we're there. So, you know, once again, it was rewarding and it was exciting. And that's where I met Kathy, was up in Alaska. And what really impressed me about Kathy is you could go live out in the bush with her for 2 weeks without a shower or change of clothes, and she still smelled good. There's just no other guys I've worked with in these jobs. There's a real distinction there. Now, Arthur
No sniffing.
Anyways, met Kathy, and but life as good as it was. We were up there, what, 5-7 years? Life was really great. I mean, really couldn't complain. You know, I was getting paid well. We were only working an average of 6 months a year, and then we'd go to some place like, where did we go? We went to New Zealand and, you know, all of Hawaii, and would take long vacations. It was a great life. But I found myself getting more and more angry at my passengers and things like that. And you know, these are people that I had no reason to get angry at, and losing my temper. And I figured it was just too much time in Alaska, you know, that I was getting burnout, because it's a tense job, and you know, like in you know, when people make mistakes in Alaska, everyone gets killed, you know, if you're working in the mountains. So I figured it was a tension and just burnout. So I said, Kat, let's get out of Alaska. So we moved to Hawaii. And when I got to Hawaii, all hell broke loose. I mean, I hadn't been there 4 or 5 months, and I had my first intrusive thought. It wasn't my first, as it turned out, my first noticeable one. I was sitting there drinking a beer, looking out the doors at the sunset on the West Maui Mountains. Kathy was making dinner. And we were talking, and I looked out the door, and I looked back, and I saw a hand with a knife in it come down and stab Kathy in the back. And I knew that it was my hand. And I went, oh, what? You know, what's that about? And tried to dismiss the thought, but it kept coming back. I mean, really, hourly almost at points. And so I realized that this was, something I had to deal with. So I told Kathy, I said, Kat, I see myself stabbing you in the back. And she goes, well, what is it, like cooking? And, honestly, there was absolutely no reason. We have nothing between us to create any kind of friction of that nature. Anyways, so we just went along with that for a while, but it kept getting worse and worse, and then it became not just Kathy, but other things. And in hindsight, I actually had another intrusive thought. It was probably about 12 months after I got back from Vietnam. I was in the Caribbean, and I'd gone over to a friend's house. This guy's wife was going to cut my hair. And I was sitting there on a chair, and she was cutting my hair. And this was a time in St. Croix when there was a lot of tension going on. People were shooting each other, so everyone was carrying guns. And this gun was on a end table next to the couch, and I was looking at that as she was cutting my hair, just sort of focusing on it. And at some point, I just saw myself picking the gun up and pulling the trigger randomly. And I could see the trajectory of the bullets, and I knew they would be going past and around my friends and dangerously close. And I didn't seem to care, and that's what sort of freaked me out. I mean, and when I thought about it the next morning, I went, well, you just got back from a war, people are shooting at you, no big deal, it's not unexpected to see something as strange as that. But anyways, nothing like that happened again until I saw what I saw with Kathy, and then it was a different ballgame. This was 15 years later. I hadn't been shooting people for a long time. She was my wife, and I loved her, and I was very scared. I was very scared I might hurt her. I didn't know how far this thing could go. It was basically like torture, and it kept growing. Fortunately, before long, the anger started coming up and even surpassing the intrusive thoughts. So I didn't really have a long time to focus on it because anger just became an incredible part of my life. I mean, just all day. And it would just come on in red-hot flashes. And I always thought that I was the one who was totally wrong. And I always thought everyone was someone else's problem. And I really, really couldn't control it. At one point, the anger turned to rage. And this was an incident I'll never forget. The rage would start, I'd be talking to Kathy, and I'd start getting angry. And then I would feel it change. I would feel it sort of coalesce in my heart. And then I would feel it start to surge. And it would literally surge from my chest into my head, and pressure in my head. And then I would just start raving at her for minutes. And it was unbelievable, uncontrollable. And once again, I always thought it was her fault. It didn't take very long to realize that we couldn't go on like that. So I started apologizing. And that's very effective. I mean, in fact, it's the only tool that you can use against rage is apology to people. After a while, that's all you're doing every day, but still, it is effective. The next thing that came along was I lived with that anger for quite a while. I went that on for about 2 years. And then we moved, once again, we were in Hawaii, and all the time this pressure is building, the anger, the intrusive thoughts, taking over my personality. Then my instinct was to run. I think that's why we left Alaska the first time, and we left Hawaii. We came back to upstate New York. We came back there for 2 years, and then we left and went back to Alaska, and then we went back to Hawaii. So that was my, okay, I chose nice places to run to. Can't fault me for that, right? Some people might call it vacations, but I really was. I was escaping my problems. I was really trying to run away from them. And it was working pretty well. I was avoiding, but it was in Alaska, the second time around in Alaska, when I started having suicidal depressions. And that was really interesting. I was sitting at my desk working on this book, Easy Target, and I heard a voice off to my left. All these things always came off to my left. And it said, kill yourself. And it was just this subtle voice. I swear, that's all I heard. I looked in that direction. What? So I heard this voice, kill yourself. And it's in your head. It's not like it's talking out of the closet. It's in your head. It's a very simple voice. And it said, kill yourself. And around, at that point, I'm going, what? And I just felt myself sinking. I felt like I was sinking into a hole. If you can imagine sitting at your desk and your chair becomes a 55-gallon drum, and you just slowly settle into it. And everything around you disappears. It doesn't become dark, but you just don't have any connection with it anymore. And while you're there, you just keep hearing this voice saying, kill yourself. And it went on for probably 2 or 3, 4 minutes. And then it started receding, and I basically came out of the place I was. And I went, what the hell was that all about? And I have a very simple philosophy about suicide. If I have $1 left, if I have a plane ticket I can get anywhere, if I have anyone that will talk to me, okay, I'll do suicide later. I mean, it really is, I'm pretty easy to be, I like to be distracted, and suicide just really isn't something that I was interested in. But I kept having these depressions, sometimes 3 or 4 a day. And even though they'd last only 4 or 5 minutes, they were exhausting. I would come out of them exhausted. And after 2 years, and then that's when I got on lithium. I got on lithium to help, and that worked wonderful. I tried some of the other things, I guess they're beta blockers and stuff like that, and they actually make the problems worse. But lithium really gave me a break. And but even with the lithium, even after a year on lithium, I told Kathy at one point, because we had a 1-year-old son at that point, our son Tiger, and I told her, I might not be around in 2 years, in a couple of years. And she goes, what do you mean? I go, these suicidal depressions, I'm winning them, but I'm getting exhausted. I could finally see why people would kill themselves. It's not a choice after a certain point. It's the only logical thing to do, to get away from it. So we did the right thing. I moved again. We went back to Hawaii. Every time you move, you're distracted guaranteed for 4 months. You got to plan the move. You got to get everything in order, and then you got to move there. You got to find a place to live, and you got to furnish it. You got to find out where to shop and stuff like that. So these distractions are great, and so we moved back to Hawaii, and everything went quite well there for a while. But then I got involved with had to get involved with the Adjudication Commission, the board of the VA. And that became a whole other life of itself. That was very difficult. If you're going to get involved with the VA, adjudication part, now the medical and the adjudication are 2 completely different entities. And staffed by very different people. The medical community are nice, people I share, and they're nice and neat. Any of you guys from adjudication here? Yeah. I think they're ogres. I've never seen one. I think they're really big, and they carry clubs or something. They squish little people. No, in all fairness, they have a terribly tough job. They really do, but they have to do it the way they do. They have to put you through the ringer. They can't just go, oh yeah, you got this problem, we'll take care of you forever. The VA isn't an emergency room. It's a care center, basically. But anyways, if you're going to deal with the adjudication, first thing you do is get a hold of the Veterans Benefits Manual and read that. It's published by the VA, and it's an excellent publication on what you can expect. When you actually start dealing with them, get a hold of all the CFR Title 38. That lists their criteria. Because if you find what your issue is and put it in their verbiage and send it to them, it's a million times easier for them to respond to you. And usually you get much quicker and much more positive results. If you call up and if you write and call up and say, I've got a problem, get angry and stuff like that, it doesn't work. It just doesn't go very far. But let's see, where were we? Okay, I was going nuts, panic attacks, and I was very hesitant to go to get help, and I'll get into that later why I think that is. So basically, I got in touch with the VA over dental issues. My jaw had been shattered, and they were great. They replaced my teeth and did all that kind of stuff, and so I stuck with the VA for just about everything. And I noticed a real difference, and then of course I started getting psychological help. And I noticed a real difference between psychologists and psychiatrists. Psychiatrists are more like doctors. They are trained by the AMA, and they are allowed to give out drugs and stuff like that, Medicaid. And they apply that quite liberally. And psychologists, on the other hand, are trained to deal more with what's going on in your mind and try and get to the symptom, or try and get to the cause, where the psychiatry and medicine basically treat symptoms. Now, there's a time for treat symptoms. When you're about to shoot yourself, better to get treated with, treated as strongly as you can. But if you're trying to figure out why you're going to shoot yourself, I suggest psychologists. And I suggest female psychologists. They just seem to be more understanding to this type of an emotional thing, because it is extremely emotional. Okay. Let's see. So, what have I learned from all this? From these experiences? Well, I can only speak for myself, of course. And my PTSD, I believe, developed from living in an environment of fear. Now, I'm not talking about getting shot down and all those things and having my back broken. You expect that kind of thing when you're out there flying around, and you're trained to do it. And I was pretty darn good at it. The environment of fear was waking up in the morning in a place, and the first thing you smell is, cordite or burned wood or, powdered eggs. Something that you associate with being in a combat zone. And so your first thought is you're in a place you don't belong. You really do. And you don't notice this because you do belong there. You're there for a reason. And then I get in my helicopter, and I'm basically flying out there to let people shoot at me. I'm going out to get killed every day. But I don't look at it that way. It's my job. I'm trained at it. I'm a cocky young kid. I'm good at it. So I go out and do it. But it's that kind of thing, I think, that created my environment of fear. Now, I didn't even know I lived in an environment of fear until I got back and wrote Easy Target. I was going to write what I'd hoped would be a Catch-22 type book about my experiences over there. I wanted it to be funny and entertaining and just, a story over there. When I read the book, I was blown away. I went, God, I was scared, scared through the whole thing. And there were little threads of it. I mean, it wasn't like trembling in my boots, but I was. And I think that's what was the basis of the formation of my PTSD, is basically living in an environment of fear. This reason, because PTSD is built by the environment, or has created an environment of fear, it's also, at the same time, I was becoming a very competent pilot, a very competent warrior. I was saving my buddies' lives, it was an incredible time of life, all the camaraderie, the action. And so this environment of fear is intricately intertwined with this other character who's developing. I basically come from college, and here I am killing people in a war and flying a, $100,000 helicopter, and talking to the grunts on one radio, talking to an Air Force vac on the other one, talking to CNC on another radio. All the time I'm getting shot up. You get a little bit of confidence. So this fear is just interwoven in it, and I think that's where the real problem lies. Is that this fear becomes part of us because of the characters we develop in war. And when we come back and we can't see PTSD in yourself, when I went to my first psychologist, he'd point out all the symptoms and match them up to me. I go, yeah, I see that. But when I walk out the day, that was also in a day, I didn't feel it. There was no relating it. And I think the reason is because it was so deep and so much of a part of me, I couldn't literally relate to it, other than as to myself a whole, and that would have, meant that that's all I was. And so I never really could come to grips with it. Even today, I still really cannot come to grips with the fact that I have PTSD. So what have I learned to do? I've learned to deal with the symptoms. Okay? With intrusive thoughts, I dismiss them, just like I did that first time in the Caribbean. If I have an intrusive thought now, I just go, that's a stupid thought, and think about something else. You can get conditions where they're worse, but basically you can do that. It may have taken the 20 years I've been working at it to learn how to do it, but that's basically the only way I found to deal with them. With anger, you just have to realize it's your problem. you know, that you are the one who's angry. It's solely you. And that the further you can keep it from the people you're associated with, the better off. That doesn't mean internalize it. That means when you're pissed off, walk out of the house. And when you come back, apologize. And apologize it again and again. Distance yourself as much as you can from your anger. And eventually your anger tires out. I mean, it's still there now, but, you know, I can control it. Suicidal depressions, I think the best thing for that is to go to go to a psychologist and a psychiatrist. Get help with those. And, you know, it's the one place I do believe that medication has a place. And, but they are survivable. You know, they're not, you don't really have to kill yourself when you have suicidal depressions, I found. Panic attacks. Did I talk about panic attacks? No. Oh, God, I hate panic attacks. How can I have panic attacks? I'm a combat pilot. People are shooting my, you know, I'm going down on fire. I still have control of the helicopter. I'm talking to my door gunner. I'm, you know, trying to stay alive. But I forget the first one I had. I think I looked in the back of the car and I saw that my son's car seat was empty. And I went, "Where's the baby?" And all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe. I was hyperventilating. I was starting to suffocate. I thought I'd left the baby somewhere and I lost him. I was going, "Well, I got to get to the hospital. I'm dying. I wonder if I can get there before I die." And I went, "Oh, I left the kid at school." And that was over. There's the panic attacks I found also are something that I really can't explain how they come, you know, where they are, how I can get rid of them. So I deal with them too. And the way I deal with panic attacks is yoga breathing. It's phenomenal what breathing in through your nose for a slow count and out through your mouth for a slow count can do. 3 repetitions of it, as slow as you possibly can. It's totally relaxing. When that doesn't work, I take an Ativan. But you know, I mean, it works. And once you break a panic attack, it's usually gone. It doesn't come back. You know, so that's the good news about them. But they are still with me today. I still get panic attacks. All the stuff is still with me today, basically. I've just learned how to live with it. And you can. As far as learning how to live with it, one of the most important things is having support. You can't do it alone. My first support was my dog, Zach. I got him secondhand when I came back. He was a Doberman. And that dog saved my life. We went back to the mountains, my place up in the mountains, and would go walking every day. And every day it got better. But then I got Kathy and the kids, and they were okay too. But really, having a support group is the most important thing you can have in your life. If you're alone, I think it's terrifying. If you're alone and you drink, you're doomed. Seriously, it's almost that bad of a scenario. So, you know, if you have any support groups, if you have a support group, keep them. Be kind to them, apologize to them, talk to them all about what's going on in your head. They'll forget the next day, so don't worry, it's not going to really bother them. But keep as close contact to you. If you don't have a support group, get one. If it's a puppy or a cat, you're probably best off than 99% of people out there. But that's what's been important to me. And also taking advantage of the VA. The facilities here are unlimited. There's something, the VA, unfortunately the VA has to deal primarily, they're primarily set up around configuration of the AMA, which is clinical. I mean, they have clinical studies. And clinical doesn't connect with, at least me. And I believe the reason is because of this whole internalization and mixing of fear and our personalities. Clinical studies refine things, bring them down, but they're impersonal. And PTSD is just too personal. Once again, because it's so, killing people is tied in just as closely as the most important with saving the people. My skills as a pilot is tied in with crashing. It's all it's all just impossible to separate it out. And I think when someone from, you almost want to say the outside, tries to approach and give you information that is helpful to you, it's like you just completely withdraw. It's a very tough boundary to cross, but they're there. There's a lot of merit in their studies. It's hard to understand, and you don't have to apply it yourself, but it's worth, taking advantage of what I have. The most important thing they have, I think, for me, is just being there. And I particularly like the clinics. I have a hard time going into a big hospital like in Albany. It's just, freaks me out. But the clinics are great. The people are nice, they're interested, and they have unlimited resources once they start directing you in the right direction. And you have to open up to them, of course. You have to come in and really try and work with them. But these clinics like this are, I think, our salvation. Are for a long period being able to live with this disorder forever. Because I think you do live with it forever. There is no cure per se without going in and totally separating it from the rest of your life. If you can do that, fine. As a matter of fact, the only guy I know who really hasn't had to deal with PTSD at all, who I know well, is my best friend Craig, and the guy from flight school. And he just doesn't care about anything. He never has his whole life. I mean, he doesn't care about his family and his friends. He doesn't care about anything that's put on him on an outside pressure. And he's the only one. But most of us are influenced by the things we do to a greater degree. So remember, be good to your family and your friends, and stop by the VA whenever you can and take advantage of what they have to offer. And that's about my message, I think. Oh, something else I'd like to add. There are 25 million diagnosed cases in the U.S. of PTSD, diagnosed cases. This is from a reliable publication. Now that's not only vets, it's firefighters, trauma, rape, everyone, but there are 25 million cases. So we're not alone, but it's obviously a real big problem in society. And, we've got to learn to live with it. Any questions? Sir.
My name is Mark Truian, and I'm a Vietnam veteran. I'm also a veteran of the latest Iraqi war, so I've had the benefit of being in two of my generation's most unpopular wars. Have you found, and did it attribute to your condition, upon returning to American society, perhaps the indifference or the open hostility that society treated the returning veteran? I don't pay too much attention to what other people think of me. Okay.
But honestly, I really didn't care. And I came back to a small town where everyone knew me. I was very fortunate in that respect. When I'd run into it later, to me, I never took it personally. I thought those people just didn't know what they're talking about. I thought they didn't know what they're talking about in respect to me, and I thought that they had their own agenda. There was something else motivating them. They just didn't. No, I don't think it contributed to my PTSD. I don't think so. I think my PTSD is pretty much formed in
All by yourself.
All by myself. And I think it's the same if someone's in a car accident, and they're afraid of cars. They're always afraid that incident never leaves their mind. And they get in another car and they're afraid. They're basically in the same environment of fear that I am, and they end up with a lot of the same symptoms. The fringe things like that it could make you mad and stuff like that, and make you feel more isolated. But I think the isolation is an innate problem anyhow in PTSD, and to be avoided at all costs.
Okay, I was thinking about the anger issues that you had mentioned.
Oh no, that was weird. That anger was intrinsic. It wasn't ever promoted. It was all mine. Kathy would say something, and I'd go, "What do you mean?" And that's enough to get the anger going. I mean, just simply, "What do you mean?" It would be not asking her a question. "What do you mean by that, dear? What do you mean? Are you saying something?" It was bizarre how deep and how deep and yet close to the surface it was. What I attribute that to, in my case, is once again the fear. I think if you're frightened, you react with anger. And I think that fear, even though, Kathy can tell you, if I'm confronted, I tend to attack first. But I'm frightened when I'm attacking. I learned, you know, I'm conditioned to attack, but I'm frightened. So I'm still a frightened person. I mean, I'll be the last person to turn and run, but I can feel the fear in my heart when I'm even being aggressive. So yeah, I think the anger comes from the fear that was instilled. Once again, I'm not trying to blame things on the war. I think it's just a unique set of circumstances, or on a car accident or anything. It's a unique set of circumstances that you know, you internalize, and they become yours. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi. My name is Bob Fertline. I'm a physician in town here. I'm also a vet, a Vietnam vet. Wasn't taken in by the white first cab.
Oh, yeah.
We'll talk later.
What year?
68, 69.
That's when I was there.
Yeah, we'll talk later. I actually believe that...
You didn't cut a thing off my head.
Probably did. Wouldn't be surprised. How bad is the scar?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, you mentioned there are 25 million people who have various symptoms of PTSD. I have a great deal of respect for our basically our species and how we've evolved over the last millions of years. And I believe that the various symptoms that all of us get from our experiences, be they a rape or some terrible tragedy or war, it's a normal reaction of our body and our brain to a very abnormal set of circumstances. The reason everybody has this is because it's normal. It's normal for human beings to have this. And what's not normal is what human beings have to go through, be it a rape or a tragedy or war. You know, my great uncles that I was so, you know, as a 5-year-old boy, they came back from the Second World War. You know, they couldn't talk much about their experiences, and they're still alive and they're still bothered by it. It's war and all the other tragedies of the firefighters and the police people go through. These are abnormal situations, but our response, which causes various symptoms, various people, maybe you're confronted at various ages. I think the older you are, perhaps the less you're affected, perhaps by that trauma, but I'm not sure about that. But I say whatever we're going through is very normal as a species, and we all know that. All those who've been in it realize this is normal, what we've experienced.
I agree with you. You know, as I said, I've always known the anger was mine,
Yeah.
and which, you know, concurs with yours. The trouble is that we don't. Most vets have a hard time. You know, they don't have a. It's hard to say I'm having problems because they're combat veterans. You know, they don't want to.
Sure.
It's hard for someone who's been in a car crash to say I'm having problems because, you know, they'll whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even worse than that is that we have found no way to talk to these people to say, hey, look, this is what's, you know, we understand. I mean, I'm still getting vets reading my book, going, hey, I thought I was the only one.
Yeah.
And I go, wait a second, we could say that in Vietnam 40 years ago because no one knew what PTSD was, it was shell shock or something like that. But you guys have all this, but they're still saying that.
Yeah.
It's such a personal thing. And the other terrible thing about it is that it's passed on, particularly the anger is passed on to children. You know, that is really scary when people yell at their kids and then their kids yell at their kids.
Yeah.
And all Vietnam vets are doing that. Or, I mean, these Iraqi and Afghan vets are doing it, more so than us. Actually, Vietnam vets, most of us were single and got right into self-medication, and, you know, we were pretty okay for a while. Yeah. Yes, sir.
When you were talking about isolation being the real hazard,
Yes.
do you think there's something in the training itself that trains you to isolate emotionally and not be able to reach out to other people? In other words, it's part of the hardening of the armor almost to deal with stuff like that.
To me, it's more of an inability to see it. You know, it's not that it's in there and it's encased, it's just mixed in there. And as I say, when I was going out, it's hard, in order for some, you have to understand. I mean, until I wrote the book, I didn't even understand that I even had it, because going out and flying out there every day, I mean, I enjoyed most of it, you know, going out there and tracking people, right up to when they were shooting at me, then, you know, but then, you know, you get the hell out of there. But, yeah, no, I think it's, but everyone's different, so. Yes, sir. Or yes, ma'am. First.
As far as insurance coverage and things like that go, I'm not a veteran, unfortunately, maybe fortunately, but I know through trying to secure life insurance that if I mention within 2 years, have I seen a counselor, have I had, thoughts I'd rather not discuss, intrusive thoughts and what have you, for whatever my reasons are, that limits my life insurance options, and you as a vet at least, you have, some promised, support that's supposed to be there for, the vets. I
Life insurance?
understand getting it's hard. Well, if you die in combat and something like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
But let's say, you're in the private sector, you're a vet, you're getting some counseling. I pay cash for counseling because I'm still struggling. But because of that, I can't get a decent life insurance policy. All I
I'd
can do
lie.
is accidental. Careful about what I'd lie about.
I mean, I would put it in a way that, that would, no, I wouldn't come out and say, yes, I'm, doing this counseling. I would,
My point, I guess, is wouldn't that, on a lot of levels, influence a vet or an active service person to not want to talk about it because
oh,
they're
yeah.
potentially going to
Oh, yeah.
lose a
Oh,
lot.
you're not going to get promoted. You're not, oh, yeah, it's terrible. I mean, but that's, that's a real issue.
I had my reasons for not wanting to face
But
my own issues.
it's easier in the military
only
because
financial.
but if you're going outside an outside insurance company, you're at their mercy. You can tell people in the VA that you have problems and they won't take your stuff away. They won't. You can't. If they don't have any benefits, right? So the VA is different than outside. And outside, honestly, I would just write it. I would word it such that you would get your coverage, but wouldn't leave yourself open to being caught for the lie. Lie. You know what I'm saying? Creative writing is what I call it. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say that if one pays cash for counseling or therapy, then generally there isn't a record of your diagnosis
Yeah.
in the insurance machine, the Big Brother insurance
Right.
machine that keeps all those diagnostic
That popped
codes and
into my
keeps
mind, too, when you said
track
pay
of
cash.
us. If you're paying cash for therapy, there probably is not a record of that. It's when you make an insurance claim,
That's when they go.
and there's a billing code with a diagnostic code, and that goes into some thing somewhere. And then insurance companies can access that, and if you don't disclose under those circumstances, they could take your money, and then if you need the service, say, oh, here's a material misrepresentation, you didn't tell us that you blah, blah, blah. But if you pay cash, in theory, you should have some privacy. Just a thought.
And remember, I didn't know that. No, it's a good line. I didn't know that. Always a good line. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
There's also, for like the younger vets that are still serving,
Right.
there's a huge stigma attached. Even now, active duty basis, I know of a person, I'm good friends with a spouse actually, and her husband just came home. And trying to get help on base for these issues, he was told straight out, stop being a big baby.
Yeah.
So to find that happening to the younger vets makes it harder for them because they see it as they're being wusses and they're told to suck it up and.
Yeah,
So I just wondered if what your thoughts on addressing that were.
mine was more of a disbelief. I couldn't believe that I had this problem. If I had been in a situation similar like that where someone said, you're a wuss, I just would have ignored them. I mean, I can see that happening, but when you start getting intrusive thoughts and the anger and things like that, it's no longer, what people see or think of you. It's what's going to happen inside you. And, so I don't know. I mean, I've never been bullied. I've never really dealt with that situation, mainly because I'd get really mad and kill them. I'm kidding.
I just want to address her. If that was the case, then I would tell them to go see the vet center.
That's a very good
Just because
point.
you're active duty doesn't mean you can't access the VA care. If you are accessing VA care, your command can see that you can request those records. Vet centers can't, so my recommendation would be go to the vet center. Any combat veteran can do that. So that'd be my recommendation for everybody.
That's a real good avenue to go, because if you just try to go up the chain of command, that's just going to get worse.
And the vet center is also open to family members of veterans for any type of, stress that they're experiencing, bereavement, maybe the passing of a veteran, a deployment of a veteran, or issues that they're having at home. So it's open to all family members. Totally anonymous.
Yes, sir. I'm going this way. Okay, guys, I'll be there then. Yes, sir.
I'd like to say we all really need and deserve mental health. I want to thank you for what you're doing to advance the cause.
I'm not making it worse.
As good as the VA system is, it can't be separated from the fact that in this country we've had to debate and not give more or parity to mental health. Not even for mental illness, but I think we should all care about everybody's optimal health and well-being. So we need to do a lot of work, and I think we're doing a little bit more in Vermont. It remains to be seen what our reform, whether it's going to be reformation or more of the same. But I like to say, I'm always fascinated when you said about breathing. We're taught in medicine that mind and body are separate. But your pain always lives in your body, and your psychology always lives in your body. So it's unfortunate that we haven't gotten past this
Yeah, which medicine were you studying, right?
very archaic.
Yeah, I mean, Western medicine doesn't, or whichever it was, the Oriental, things like they're
Eastern
very
medicine, right.
They're into
Older traditions.
They're all into.
But we don't get that here, and you won't get that in insurance. And you're lucky if you even get chiropractic or something basic. You won't get nutrition in this country from medicine. Doctors can't deliver what they don't have. So I just want to say that I don't know if you've had any experience with body-centered approaches, but there's a real, I think there's a treasure chest of opportunity in exploring
I agree with you.
the body-centered
100%.
approaches.
Definitely. There's a real way to go on that. How about, yes, sir.
Yeah, my name's Bill Ledger. I'm a Vietnam vet. For some reason, I'm sitting back here taking umbrage at what seems like a laissez-faire attitude about acceptance of responsibility of our actions. And in fact, I believe that there are many extenuating circumstances that can provoke post-traumatic stress. For instance, I'm the eldest of 4 sons of a football coach who was in the service during World War II, played sports, played football, essentially getting ready for the next war. I go to war, I'm tired about, I'm playing my team sport, I'm with a crew, we're doing what we do. One night, get back a communique, well done, you killed 9 Marines. What do you do with that one? What do you do with that one? You kill your own people. Nobody ever taught me how to do that one. Nobody taught me how to live with that one. I can accept the responsibility of my job, but it's a bitch understanding that I was part and parcel of killing 9 of my own teammates. And to this day, man, to this day, suicide looks like a good goddamn way to go out.
Totally understand. That's rational. But that's not that's not all of your story, because obviously that you're still here means you're a pretty tough son of a bitch. Okay, I mean, you can kill yourself anytime, but you've got to be pretty tough to be sitting here and to say that kind of stuff in front of us. You know, I have nothing but respect for you. And I'm sure, I don't know you personally, but I'm sure there are a lot of other people who have respect for you. And, you know, it's what's going on in your head sucks, okay? I mean, when the intrusive thoughts were in my head all the time, it was terrible. It was torture. What's in your head has got to be a million times worse. But you're living with it. You're strong. You know, look at the things that are going on around. You know, if you can see what's outside your head too. You know, I mean, I'm not trying to tell you how to live your life, but obviously you've got more. That's not all there is to your life. It's a bad mistake. You know, I once was putting down suppressive fire with my minigun. The guy popped the smoke. Came with a run, 4,000 rounds a minute, right across these guys' backs, GIs. I called the guy I didn't want to call. I just wanted to fly away. Pretend it never happened. I called the commander on the ground. I said, I guess I got some medevacs down there. He goes, what? I said, I just strafed a bunch of our guys. Someone down there's got to be real bad hurt. And they said, no, we got no wounded. So I don't know. I don't know how I missed them, but it would have been the end of my life as a pilot to have done that too. I mean, it would have just killed me.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is the double messaging that we receive, that this is good, but they don't tell you about what's not good, that there's no preparation. And I noticed that in the first Iraqi invasion, and I talked with a bunch of soldiers who were getting ready to go from Santa Fe. They weren't teaching these guys how to survive. They were actually teaching them how to die. It was unbelievable what they were telling me, and they were ready to do it because of the double messaging that they were receiving from wherever. Now that's the thing that hurts the most, is understanding that my authority figures were telling me one thing, and then when I get to the place, it ain't the truth. So when I come back, who do I believe? I can't believe anybody.
That's pretty much it.
It takes a lot. It takes, you know, I've been in therapy since '87.
Yeah.
So, you know, it takes, but it's so prevalent to see these younger people going off to Iraq and Afghanistan under the same.
Do you know how I deal with that? I'm just an optimist. And I really hope, and I think, that these wars should prove, if not to the powers that be, but to the American people, that we can't afford wars anymore. Especially IEDs have changed the whole scene. Body armor has changed the whole scene. You know, these guys just getting their heads turned to, you know, potatoes, you know, mashed potatoes, and arms and everything blown off, and they're just got this body that's protected by armor. You know, the whole thing has gotten too expensive. What is it? Something like for every soldier killed in combat, there's, I just read it today, what is it, like 1,500 or 7, an amazing amount kill themselves. I mean, it's not working anymore. Warfare was a way of settling differences and getting land and all these great things. It doesn't serve that function anymore. And the cost is just going to be too expensive. I mean, we can't afford it. We can't afford the wars we're in. We can't afford to take good care of our veterans and their kids, because they're going to need it too. It is passed on. So the only thing I can say to you, sir, is that hopefully they're going to...
My name's Bill.
Sorry, Bill.
He's enlisted.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay, Bill. I'd call you sir anyhow, just for what you've been through. And the thing is, hopefully, you know, that wars are going to come to more of an end. I think, you know, I don't know what the future is, but I just know that it's just too expensive the way that it is now. Yes. Yeah. Can I get a gentleman back there? First, thank you.
Yeah. Hi. First of all, I want to thank you for coming down to Brattleboro and sharing your experience with us
My pleasure.
and the clinic for holding this event. I think it's a good thing. I can identify with your story. First of all, my name's Tom Manning, and I live here in Brattleboro, and I was in the Marine Corps, overseas, Vietnam, all in 1968. And that's all I want to say about that. It was a bad year to be overseas. And you and I have a very similar situation. I was going to school at UVM, and I like to ski too. So I took a semester off, and I got a draft notice, but I fooled him and joined the Marine Corps.
Oh, boy,
So that shows you, shows a level of my, shows a level of my intelligence at that point. And, you know, my story is just like a lot of other people. Came back and had a horrific substance abuse history and craziness, and took years and years and years, and kind of cleaned up my act one way or another. But, you know, and have some PTSD symptoms, and that's not really what I want to talk about. What I do want to talk about is, this is not an advertisement, but I work for a program over at the Brattleboro Retreat here in town, and we specifically deal with uniformed service people. And one of the things that hasn't been touched upon a little bit was the stigma that's attached to PTSD symptoms. Now, we deal with military, uniformed services, police, fire, EMTs, first responders of all sorts. And they come into our program because it refers to the camaraderie that you mentioned before. You know, it's the togetherness. And if I've heard once, I've heard 1,000 times, I hear that word from these guys and gals, I thought I was alone. Nobody has these feelings except me. Okay, and all of a sudden they realize that they aren't alone and they aren't freaked out. And of course, we have a prerequisite 80% that are doing substances because they're medicating their issues. But even more importantly, I think, is the stigma that's attached, especially not, you know, it's been brought out in the military. I mean, when I was in the military, to say you were having a tough day, they'd say, suck it up and go talk to the chaplain. I don't think I ever saw a chaplain. I don't remember seeing one, but I'm sure there was one in Vietnam sometime in '68.
Yeah, maybe.
But any event, but some of these guys that are former military and now police, fire, EMTs, first responders, there is a stigma, and I will grant you that it's geographic. Some departments, some fire departments, some police departments, some towns, some cities are very, very supportive. But I've had guys tell me, veterans who've been overseas in these recent wars and other wars, come back and they're working as a police officer, for example, down on Cape Cod, and they don't tell them I'm here for treatment. Because if they ever find out I have depression, anxiety, or a panic attack, or PTSD symptoms, they'll stick me in a rubber gun squad. And I said to myself, what the hell's a rubber gun squad? And it means he's going to be flying a desk, and he's going to be training other officers with a rubber gun. And he's off the street, and his career is dead in the water. And that's the kind of, and it goes with, a lot with fire, EMTs, because you're supposed to be up and ready to go.
How are those covered under the, you know, the fair employment laws and stuff like that?
Some places good and some places bad. That's just been my experience, but I think the stigma attached to people that are reaching out, and you hear all the time, reach out for help, reach out for help. And like somebody down in the front spoke about before, it is suck it up, and half of it we believe it. And I think that's part of the difficulty in reaching out for help. And I've talked, and I'm involved in a recovery community locally too, and I've run into vets and other people, and it's that stigma. They don't want to talk about it because you are, maybe it was just Marine Corps training, I don't know. It was just suck it up.
My question is the stigma created, or is it you, or is it them, or is it both? I mean, you know, if a jerk tells me to suck it up, you know,
no, these guys,
I
no,
to say to them.
No, I'm talking about guys that have had 15, 20 years on a job.
And
as a policeman.
But I mean, when it starts affecting the person affected,
yeah.
Does he feel that he should be sucking it up, or is he sucking it up because someone told him to? You see what I'm saying?
He's sucking it up to save his career.
Okay, so he's sucking it up to save his career. Well, then there's got, there has to be,
Yeah.
if they're not covered by state and federal
Yeah.
employment laws, there has to be a place where they can go, like mentioned the vets coming
Vets.
to active service guys coming to the outpatient clinics, and I would definitely come to these clinics as opposed to the hospitals, just because you can work more one-on-one.
May I speak to and build on what
Sure.
has been said? For 33 years, I worked for the Vermont Department of Employment and Training as a veterans representative and also as an employer relations rep, going out and trying to find jobs, and in particular for veterans. More than once in the more recent years, I have found veterans coming into me saying they had not been offered a job and had been told directly by employers that they were not going to be hired because of the stigma attached to veterans, under the assumption that anyone coming back from a combat zone is going to have some modicum of PTSD. And that fear is going to put the rest of the employees for this particular company, whatever, off to the point where they're going to be nervous working around this person. The problem with this is it's basically he said, she said. You cannot do anything as a counselor, because if they do not come forth and make some type of complaint, it's dead in the water. I've had this
What
happen.
if they do make a complaint?
I don't know. I've never had one that did it.
Are there laws in place to keep their
There are
jobs?
laws in place, more or less, but I'm not sure anybody in this room has ever heard of one actually being prosecuted for refusing a job because it's only one person's word versus another person's word. This happened to me in 1973 when I got out of the service after coming back from Vietnam here in Vermont, in Rutland, for a hardware store who has an elephant for a trademark. And basically, they told me that, son, we can't hire you because you will frighten the rest of our employees, and we're afraid you might go postal. I heard this very same thing 4 years ago, prior to my retirement from the state, from a returning Iraqi vet who was told by a food distributing company in the area that he was not going to be hired for the very same reason. I would have thought that in the 30-some-odd years between my experience and his, that the
Right.
society
This is
would have become a
amazing.
bit more
Right, yeah.
sophisticated. That's not necessarily true. So it's a
No.
geographical thing, and people are not complaining because they fear any complaint will get around, and it's not only going to affect a career they may have or one that they may try to get.
Well, what do both of you gentlemen see as a result for this? What do you-
Societal education?
Oh, I'll forget that.
Yeah, I know.
What could be, would it be legislation, would it be, if you're discriminated to such a point that no one will hire you, then, you theoretically can go back to the VA.
Well,
and-
you speak of legislation, and it's very interesting because last week it came up in one of the Senate hearings, Senator Leahy's hearing on matters of gun control.
Right.
Senator Feinstein basically said that veterans, because of this fear of the inherent PTSD, should be scrutinized more than the rest of the world in general when it comes to doing background checks, because basically returning veterans from a combat zone are all crazy, and we shouldn't be given guns.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
They gave us guns.
Yeah, I know, they gave us guns. They gave us guns.
Oh, now I get it.
They give them away.
No, obviously that.
So legislation may be a moot point. I'm
Well-
not sure exactly, it's got to be a societal education program that, no, we may suffer from what,
The basic rule
Yes.
of thumb in this kind of thing is, if you want something to stop, and you can't, you have to put someone who's in a position
sure,
of power to do that, feel that they have to. Now, either because you threaten to sue them, or because they see it's correct, that pretty much is the spectrum. Oh yeah, we should have done that, that's a good idea. But with this kind of thing, it should be fairly simple. The legislation does, support veterans.
exist.
They love to make themselves look like great vet supporters. They don't mind asking us for some of our dues and stuff to pay for their wars, but, basically, they will support most veteran benefiting bills. And I don't know, but I would imagine that would be the way to go. Do you guys see any other course?
My only additional comment, sir, is just that if there's only 1 or 2% of the population is dealing with the military that are in fact combatants
It's
or
not.
families of,
Yeah.
I think that leaves us, what, I'll be generous and say 97 or 98% of the population that's not affected by this in any personal way.
Well, you know,
Therefore, you know, and when I see all these, you know, politicians, and that's where my anger came from back in the early 70s
Yeah.
when I came home. But that's a whole other story
see,
as
and I
well.
haven't dealt with it.
No, no.
People refuse to hire me for other reasons.
Yeah. But all I'm saying,
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Gail Murray, and I'm a social worker and a new employee at the program at the Brattleboro Retreat for first responders. And I wonder, I don't know, I'm hearing these stories about the trouble veterans are having when they come back, getting a life. And I wonder if there's some correlation between that and the high suicide rate. I mean, if you think about it, you know, coming back, you can't get a job, you know, people are treating you like damaged goods.
Well, I think there's different types of suicide, you know, I mean, for
I
me, it was
didn't
being
know.
worn out. For others, it's wrong time, wrong place. Yeah, it comes back, and once again, I can't emphasize enough the ills of alcohol. I mean, in mixed with PTSD. It's the easiest thing to do. It's fun, and boy, it's sure easy to drive fast when you're really drunk. But you're gonna get killed. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say I liked your correlation between seeing a psychiatrist, psychologist, because my son was killed in Iraq 10 years ago. And I started having panic attacks. My doctor put me on antidepressants, and that was great. And then I started drinking a little bit. My marriage fell apart. And I never heard about PTSD syndrome at all. So I finally signed myself up to talk to somebody, and she sat with me for 2 hours, diagnosed me, and I go, "Are you crazy? That's from somebody coming back from a war." Because I was scared all the time. I didn't know why. And I can talk about this now, but I kept it to myself because I can't have that, you know. But it was a trauma of my son being killed, our only child, 20 years old, in a war I still don't understand. But I like that you said that among these vets, because there is a difference. Here, take this. You're going to feel great.
Right.
And after so many years, I was like, I'm sleeping. I'm like a drone all the time. That wasn't solving my issues at all. So I finally started going to therapy like every other day for months and months and months. And I figured it out.
Yep, and that's what it really takes. I mean, you really do. You know, the bottom line is you have to learn to live with this, and the
Right.
responsibility is
And
yours.
the
There's
pills-
tons of assets, the VA, your dog, your wife, your
Yeah.
friends. You know, even there are self-medications out there that aren't terrible for you that work.
But I mean,
And,
like, I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't realize that there was a difference. I
Yeah.
realized I had to live with it, but living with it on pills and being half dead all day is
Oh, I
not,
hate it.
I'm not living.
At one point,
you know?
I had 1,300 milligrams of lithium in my blood for the suicidal depressions. I had propanol to control the leg tremors. I had Ativan for the panic attacks. I had Darvocet for my broken back. And I could literally feel my blood going through my veins like sludge. And it was gross. But the good news was, that was around the time I thought I'd be dead in a couple of years, so I didn't have to worry about it. I'm kidding. But it really is terrible that when they go that thing. And that's where, as you say, Eastern or Western, whichever medicine is, the one that we're not is, I think there's a lot of room in our society. And the VA has moved along. They do acupuncture now. And they do chiropractic. And they are trying to adjust. They have been so tightly aligned, I'm afraid, with the AMA, but I do see them starting to separate, mainly out of necessity. Brother, take care. You know, so we'll see. Yes, sir.
Just touch up on the gentleman's over there that spoke about the employment. I work at Central Western Massachusetts VA as well as White River Junction, and we just put on something in Pioneer Valley where we invited a whole bunch of VSOs. A lot of vet organizations got together, and we invited employers to come out. We had about 100 employers last June, and we spoke on PTSD, and we spoke on the skills that veterans bring into the workforce. And we actually got some companies that have hired veterans, and like standout guys that have hired veterans, and they've made their way up the ranks and have done really good, like success stories, basically. And so we were able to reach a lot of employers and touch up on PTSD, and so the VA is doing things like that. So.
And my personal feeling is that a lot of this is just, theatrics too. I mean, I don't know. I don't think they're really afraid of us freaking out. I mean, I've told Kathy, I said, I'm not. She said, are you worried about doing me harm? I said, no, Kathy, I know it takes to kill a person. I don't feel that way about you. With the intrusive thoughts. I mean, if I'm going to kill someone, it's going to be the way I killed them in war. It's not going to be because something's telling me in my head to kill someone. That's not, and I think that's really, unless they lose control, which usually involves, as I say, alcohol and isolation, generally, are safer people. I don't know, that's my feeling.
Thank you very much.